All right, right out the gate, I'll say it. The camera quality isn't great, but you know what? It's fitting because the analysis won't be either. We're going to continue the top 20 Dynasty quarterback rankings. I left off with number 10 last time, which was Justin Fields. We're going to pick up with 11 through 20 right after the intro. My quarterback 11 is Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill was within my top 10 prior to the draft, prior to some offseason moves, but they do lose Corey Davis. They lose Jonnu Smith. They lose Arthur Smith. I'm not saying that he's not going to be a good quarterback anymore. All I'm saying is there's a whole lot of moving pieces that it can't help, right? Having Anthony Ferkser as your second best receiving option is not going to help your case, but he can still run the ball really well. He still has A.J. Brown, who's a beast after the catch. But let's be real. After that, what do they really have? Like Adam Humphries is fucking corpse, and Des Fitzpatrick, who's a big receiver that thinks he's small. It's it's ugly. But I do think that the way this team is run and how Arthur Smith has implemented a system of using two tight end sets, of using a lot of play action, of using Derrick Henry to be able to establish the run and then use play action will definitely help Ryan Tannehill still put up pretty good numbers and run a pretty solid and pretty sustainable game plan. Now, I would feel a lot more comfortable if they had like one other receiver on this team, which they don't. So he's my quarterback 11, but he's in a tier of a few other guys. So I wouldn't knock you for having him down at like quarterback 14. But the dominance he's shown over these past years, despite not even having that great of a receiving group to begin with, like Corey Davis is good, but he's not like world changing when it comes to a receiving core. Obviously, AJ Brown is awesome, but AJ Brown is still there. Jonnu Smith was basically like an H back all last year. So he's not a huge part of this offense. I do think that like Taylor Lewan coming back and them having a good offensive line will definitely still help make the case for him to be a quarterback one in Dynasty, but I wouldn't knock you for having him lower because of the lack of weapons there. Followed by him, we have Jalen Hurts. Now, I get it. I haven't said the name Joe Burrow yet, and you're going to be upset about it. But Jalen Hurts to me brings a similar floor because of his ground game with a similar upside because obviously the ground game builds in that really high floor. Plus, he also has some new weapons in town. Obviously, Miles Sanders can do something out of the backfield. As a rookie, he was definitely a better receiver than he was in 2020. Last year, he couldn't catch a fucking STD in a strip club. Now, maybe he'll get back to form. If not, we know that they have Kenny Gainwell now in the fold who can catch passes out of the backfield as he did in Memphis. They bring in Devonta Smith, who is extremely skinny, but guess what? He's good at football. They're moving Jalen Rager to the slot. Maybe not his natural position, but probably one where he's going to face a little bit less competition when it comes to cornerback matchups. I just think that this offensive group and the weapons that are surrounding Jalen Hurts is completely revamped. It's his second year in the league. He still has a decent tight end in Dallas Goedert. We don't even know what Zach Ertz is doing if he's playing football anymore. He can't make a man miss, so I really don't care about him. But I do think his rushing ability is a good enough reason to have him in this back end quarterback one discussion. And listen, you can say he can't throw the ball well, but guess who else couldn't throw the ball well? Lamar Jackson. Look where he's at now. Josh Allen. Look where he's at now. Shit, Kyler Murray barely can throw the ball, and look where he is right now. So I'm not going to knock him too heavily for not having the most accurate or the biggest arm because rushing is such a big part of fantasy football nowadays that he's going to give you that floor week after week. And I think the fact that they didn't invest in a quarterback and they traded back in the draft tells me that they have some sort of confidence that Jalen Hurts could be the guy of the future. Now, after Jalen Hurts, my quarterback 13 is when we get to Joe Burrow. I get it. A lot of people like Burrow. Fucking Jack Harlow wrote a song about him, how he's in the pocket like Burrow, then his knee snapped in 13 different which ways. I get it. He's a good quarterback. He's also kind of old for being a young guy, whatever that means, a little oxymoronic. But I do think that he does not bring a similar floor and not as appealing of a ceiling as these other guys. Like as I went through my top 10, how many guys there were extremely one dimensional, right? You could argue Patrick Mahomes. You could argue maybe Trevor Lawrence will be. But other than that, like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert to some extent, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, all these guys can run really well. And I know Joe Burrow can be mobile, and I know he can run and call his own number on the goal line, which he did last year. But the way I think of it is this guy just blew his knee out like Sarah J blows her fucking back out every Sunday night. And you think that they're going to want him to call his own number behind this still shitty offensive line and potentially get hurt again. Listen, I hate Joe Mixon as much as the next guy, but I don't think they're going to take the rock out of his hands to put it in Joe Burrow's and have him run the ball. Now, that's not the only part of his game, right? Joe Burrow is obviously a very good passer of the ball. Doesn't have the greatest arm, but neither did Drew Brees, neither did Tom Brady. Uncle Rico was throwing that shit over a mountain and he was living in an RV. So I don't think arm talent is all that matters. He was a pretty good fantasy quarterback, but having Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins and now Jamar Chase in that receiving group, we already know that the rapport is built with Jamar Chase through college. And the other two built rapport with Joe Burrow as a rookie. So I do think that he has a very good and not underrated because I think like everybody's stacking in best ball right now, but like a very good and very solid receiving core that could definitely buoy his fantasy value, especially when you consider they're all very young weapons. They're all on pretty decently long contracts. So they're going to be with Joe Burrow for a long ass time. My main concern is, and it's not really a concern, it's just more of why I have him lower than the other guys listed ahead of him, is the lack of rushing ability and the fact that he's coming off a pretty major knee injury. And I think that his rushing ability that we thought he had last year probably won't come to fruition this year or maybe in the near future because the team might be a little bit worried about how stable and how sustainable he will be if he goes out there, tucks it and runs and takes a few big hits. And now we start to get into like a group of guys who are not geriatric, but a little bit older. Quarterback 14, I have Matthew Stafford. Now, Matthew Stafford is one of my favorite quarterbacks for redraft every year because nobody wants him. Then you draft him, then you're like, oh shit, I got to steal. And then guess what? You don't want him again. But he does have a few good weeks here or there. The main difference now, he's no longer in Detroit. Detroit is an absolute shithole. Kenny Galladay was hitting his girl from the back and then he blew out his hip and he's like, I can't play football anymore. Marvin Jones is like on American Idol and has a cupcake shop. They had nothing going in Detroit. Now he goes to LA with a team that has a plethora, a myriad of weapons. He's got fucking Robert Woods, who's the wide receiver 14 every year. He's got Cooper Kupp, who catches a million touchdowns a year, or he doesn't catch any touchdowns and goes for 1,000 yards. It's a flip flop. Or they have Tyler Higbee, who had like the best 5 game stretch for a tight end of all time, then disappeared for 16 weeks last year. They got Cam Akers out of the backfield. They got like Tutu Atwell. They got Van Jefferson. These other wide receivers that aren't good, but they drafted them really high in the NFL draft. He has a beautiful set of weapons in LA. He has a coach and an offensive mind who isn't named like Jim Bob Cooter. So that's got to be an upgrade. Who isn't named Matthew Patricia or Daryl Bevel. I know Bevel isn't terrible, but what he did in Detroit wasn't so great. He's got a good offensive line supported by a good defense. I think this is a championship caliber team in real life. And I think Matthew Stafford as well has really gotten the short end of the stick throughout his entire career playing for a shithole franchise like the Detroit Lions in a new scenery, in warm weather, in a competitive division. I really like the spot. Could be a little bit high because, he has those back issues, but who doesn't have back issues? So I have him as my quarterback 14. Quarterback 15 kind of breaks the mold. I go back to a younger guy in Zach Wilson. I know people aren't fans of him because he went to BYU, dominated some shit competition, put on a headband that said anytime, any place, anywhere. Then good colleges are like, hey, let's play you. And he's like, oh, shit, I wasn't really about it. So I know he has those knocks on him, but you got to think of it like this, right? He was still the second overall pick in the draft. He was taken to a team who has shown signs that they want to at least improve their weapons group. They improved their offensive line last year. They took Elijah Vera Tucker again this year. So further making a better offensive line built around this franchise quarterback. They bring in Corey Davis. They already have Jamison Crowder. They draft Elijah Moore. They already had Denzel Mims, whatever the fuck he's doing. They have Chris Herndon, who will hopefully be off the couch this year. A brand new coaching staff. I know the stigma of the New York Jets is that the team sucks. The quarterback's going to suck. We've seen it multiple times, whether it's Sam Darnold, Mark Sanchez, and, he's a second overall pick. Who really cares? So was Mitch Trubisky. So was Carson Wentz. I think that with his mobility, and he wasn't running for a ton of yards in college at BYU, but he ran for quite a bit of touchdowns. I wouldn't be surprised with the lack of running backs that they have in New York that if we don't see a very similar output to what Joe Burrow was doing last year, where if they're on the goal line, maybe he calls his own number, drops his shoulder, gets those 1 to 2 yards on a quarterback sneak and turns that into a touchdown. Along with that, his ability to extend plays with a receiver now there in Elijah Moore, who, at least in college, made his bread on separating, and that'll definitely help him because prior to Elijah Moore being there, they didn't really have a guy who could benefit off of Zach Wilson extending plays. And he's just got such a big arm. And I think that if he shows out in any way this year, kind of like what Justin Herbert did last year, his value and his stock can only rise. People are letting him fall to like the 110 in rookie drafts. And I get it. If you're skeptical about owning a Jet, I would be too. But there's just so much invested in the guy. And I don't think that his leash is as short as many people think, right? They just went from the third overall pick in Sam Darnold for a few years to Zach Wilson. I don't think that they're going to cut ties with him if he has 1 to 2 bad years. I think it's going to be very similar to Daniel Jones on the lower end. Like if he sucks like Daniel Jones, look, Daniel Jones still has a job. I think Zach Wilson has a pretty long leash. and he's going to have multiple opportunities to prove himself. And after him, my quarterback 16. Now, these two are kind of in a tier together, but I'll name 16 first. It is Tom Brady. I get that he's old, but that was the argument last year. Like people were taking fucking Drew Lock ahead of him in Dynasty. And my argument always was, listen, Drew Lock probably has the same window of being a starter in the NFL that Tom Brady has left in his career. And I would much rather have, from a redraft perspective, Tom Brady each of the next 2 years than Drew Lock. Well, it looks like Tom Brady probably has more time in this league than Drew Lock. And we saw what he did last year. One of the best years of his career. They're bringing everybody back to Tampa Bay. I don't know how the NFL salary cap works. All I know is it's working for Tom Brady. They got Mike Evans. They got Chris Godwin. They got OJ Howard. They got Rob Gronkowski. They got probably Cameron Brate. I don't even know what the deal was with Antonio Brown, but I'm assuming if he still wants to play football, he's going to go to Tampa Bay. He was so good last year and they won the Super Bowl. I really don't see him retiring or not wanting to play anytime soon. And even if he's like 85 to 90% of what he was last year for these next 2 years on their contract, or if he wants to be extended or like keep playing after that, I don't doubt that he's still going to be a very good quarterback, just a really smart guy, takes care of his body. The TB12 method is paying off big time. So if you want to be good at your job for like 40 years, just don't eat strawberries. I'm comfortable taking Tom Brady as the quarterback 16 in my rankings, just because I do think that even if it's 3 years left in his career, I wouldn't be surprised if two of those is a top 12 quarterback. And the last one, he's like quarterback 20. And then, you kind of respect it. You respect Tom Brady playing until he's 45. And you can say and rationalize away that, hey, I didn't really expect a 49-year-old man to be the quarterback 12 again. And then after him, I have Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback 17. Now, if we knew he was in Green Bay, or if we even knew he was playing football, he would be much higher. But similar to a guy that I'm going to mention later in this list, we just don't know at this point. I do think that the common belief, although maybe not the one voiced the most, is that Aaron Rodgers will play this year. I don't know. It seems like he's more interested in asking Jeopardy questions and throwing deep balls that go incomplete to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and I don't blame him. But if he ends up back in Green Bay, if he's playing this year and he wants to play out his contract, he could probably move all the way up to my quarterback 9, which is a pretty far cry from where he's sitting at right now, just because we saw what he could do last year. If he's healthy, he is a top 5 quarterback in this league. Now, he wouldn't be higher than that just because guys like Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, yada, 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 they have more longevity and similar type of ceilings to Aaron Rodgers on a yearly basis. But right now, it really looks like he doesn't want to go back to Green Bay. If he goes to Denver, I would like that too because they have so many weapons there. Although Drew Lock makes it look like they have such little weapons there. But as it stands right now, there's just too much up in the air for me to have any sort of confidence pulling the trigger on Aaron Rodgers ahead of guys like Joe Burrow, Matt Stafford, Zach Wilson, and even Tom Brady. After A-Rod, we have Tua, the man I wanted in blue and gold last year. Happy he's not there. Listen, I know he had a terrible rookie year, but not many people expected him to really come out the gates starting. Not many people expected him to even play because Fitzpatrick was doing so well. I don't think he was ready to go out there. He really didn't take too many deep shots last year at all. We know that could be part of his game from what he did at Alabama. Last year was just very Alex Smith like, where he was just a game manager and honestly probably shouldn't have even touched the field with how injured he was going into the year and how well Fitzy was playing. His team had playoff hopes and they were just so much better with Fitzpatrick under center. And then there were the reports that Tua wasn't even like people's favorite quarterback on the roster. Jalen Waddle's now on the team who said he liked Mac Jones better. Listen, it's kind of a shit show, but you can't write off a quarterback after 1 year. I know it was ugly and I know it wasn't anything promising being shown, but he has a good weapons group. They added Will Fuller, they added Jalen Waddle, they have Devontae Parker, they have a guy like Mike Gesicki, they even brought in Hunter Long, they have a pass catching running back in Myles Gaskin out of the backfield. Maybe like Joe Burrow, like I said before, they don't want him running because of the injury history, but we know that's in his bag. So if he is fully healthy, that can be added to the repertoire as well. I don't think putting him any lower is any fair to him because he's still super young and he still definitely has a fairly long leash. Like if they thought that he was not the guy, you don't think they would have taken a quarterback this year? I also think they would have done what they had to do to get a guy like Deshaun Watson when he was on the trade block. So I think Tua may have a little bit longer of a leash than many people think. Because of that, he's my quarterback 18. He is followed by Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is like the safest 4,200 yards and 29 to 31 touchdowns a year. It's not sexy, but in Superflex leagues, you want that as your quarterback too. Really not much to say here, right? They have the same weapons as they did last year. They bring in that guy like Amir Smith Marset. I'm sorry if that's not his name, just off the top of the head. They got him. They got Irv Smith, who's young. They lost Kyle Rudolph, which is probably like a positive when all things are considered. They still have a great young receiver in Justin Jefferson, and they still have Adam Thielen in the same division. Like, not much has changed there. So I'm going to keep Kirk Cousins where he's always been as like a back end quarterback 2, despite every year finishing as a low end quarterback 1 or a high end quarterback 2. But he's ranked as a low end quarterback 2 just because we all know his ceiling really isn't at this point like a top 3 quarterback. Whereas you could argue even a Tua could have a top 5 season. Kirk Cousins, I think those years are behind him. And then to round out my top 20, I have Baker Mayfield. I know people were hounding for him in the comments. He has a great weapons group. I just don't think that there's any sort of ceiling here. With Stefanski there, with the running game there, with Odell there, who would rather have a shit thrown to his chest than an actual football, there's not a lot to really think that there's upside for. I know that they are a very good team or look to be a very good team this year with like a great defense and they're in a competitive division. But the same was true last year and they ran the shit out of the ball. Baker Mayfield had a great end of year, but he did that with like Donovan Peoples-Jones and like Rashard Higgins and Jarvis Landry as his top options. I think when everybody's healthy and even when like Odell's out there, for some reason they just don't opt to throw as much and it worked out better that way. So I do think this is going to be a very run heavy team. Baker Mayfield doesn't have the rushing upside that a lot of these guys ahead of him on the list have. And he also doesn't really throw the ball enough to give him a high enough ceiling via just his arm to warrant a top 12 ranking or even like a top 15 ranking. And lastly, I just want to cover Deshaun Watson. He's my quarterback 21 right now. If, and I say if, he is not suspended, he faces no penalties or whatever. If he plays this year, he's probably my quarterback 6, maybe 5 ahead of Kyler Murray. But because there's so much up in the air, if I'm drafting today, I would still, and maybe I'd rather take him than Baker Mayfield, to be honest. But like everybody else on this list, I'd probably take ahead of him just because there's always that chance he may never play again. Kind of like Darius Geis 2 years ago, right? Everybody was banking on the fact that, hey, Roger Goodell doesn't give a shit about anything. He's going to let these guys play. He let Kareem Hunt play. He let Tyreek Hill play. He didn't let Ray Rice play, but that was like a one-off incident. But we saw that, Darius Geis never turned any value because he couldn't get back on the field. We don't know what's going on with Deshaun Watson situation. Listen, it's not looking good. So I don't want to invest in a guy whose situation off the field isn't looking good right now. It remains to be seen what comes of it, but I'd rather bet on a guy like even fucking Tua or Kirk Cousins, who I know is playing this year, over somebody who may never play again. So that's where I'm at. If he does play, he's a locked and loaded top 5, top 6 dynasty quarterback. If he doesn't, then he's not a quarterback to be put on any list at all. So I'm going to leave it at that. You make your own decision with Deshaun Watson. If you're more risk averse like me, you're not taking him. If you don't give a shit about anything, then you probably already took him like the 4th round of your startup. So just like anything, invest to a point where you can afford to lose him, I guess. So if you're trading like rookie picks and you can get him for like 2/3, shit, I'd do that. I'd probably do it for like a late second and like 15 thirds because thirds suck and late seconds really mean nothing. So if you can get him for rookie picks, go for it because the downside is he never plays again. But guess what? The downside of those picks and probably the most probable outcome of those picks is that they're all Van Jefferson. So I would do that for sure. Anything in the first round, I wouldn't be doing that unless you can maybe do like a first round pick for Deshaun Watson and then like also get another player on top. But it would have to be a pretty decent player. But that's all I got for my top 20, my 11 through 20. If you want to check out 1 through 10, it was posted Tuesday. So you can click that. I don't know how to link it on the video, but I'm sure you can find it on the channel. I titled it, it would be easy to find. But that's all we got for today. I think next week I'm going to do my running back. So probably a little bit more different than what consensus is. Like quarterbacks are pretty consensus. Running backs are a little bit different. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. Thumbs up if you enjoyed. Thumbs down if you didn't. Subscribe if you're new. And comment which quarterbacks I left off that I shouldn't. Or comment if some of the quarterbacks I put on here are way too high, just like Animal. But that's it for today. We'll catch you guys sometime soon. Peace.
10 Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoenaed for misdemeanors. Dreamer, held back asses, Loki still a deer. And I still shake a boat squat. Ran for my broke, got city on the come.